Hi, everybody. I made this video um, as a mix of two separate things, a part of an essay that I put together and an interview that I actually had with someone. So it's kind of the second part to two different things that have happened with me, which kind of spawned this entire thing. It's something that really needs to be talked about that I would like to actually engage with others about and find out what their experiences are. Um, so I'm, of course, going to try to blur my face and change my voice if I can just to protect my identity. And I'm going to try to make this as short as possible. But what I will say is, so I actually just threw this together without much of an organized rhetoric, which is something I probably um, should have done and taken more time with because of the seriousness of this topic and its dynamic, which will only sidetrack some and in other instances cause me to forget or leave out some of the main points or the critical facts. However, I urge the viewers to engage in your own rhetoric in the comments section below, adding your thoughts, experiences, and your own perceptions. So I want to start with disclaiming, of course, that some of the language that I will use will be generalizations or general terms. Specifically, while I do not believe all white people or all Americans are racist, I am highlighting and supporting my perspective on institutionalized racism and systemic prejudice. So please keep in mind that my experiences are not made up and that there is such thing as racism for all of the disbelievers out there. But I will say that some of these theories apply to all races, all ethnicities, not all races. But so the video is about the hiring process, labor laws, labor relations, equal employment opportunity, and affirmative action, discrimination. The main point, if I could put it into words, even though it is an open conversation, but to start us out, I would just say the main point is the question: are hiring managers throwing our applications and resumes in the garbage? I know it sounds funny, but this is pretty much, what I would ask anybody. Are organizations throwing your applications in the garbage without considering your candidacy fairly? There are many thesis statements that I could have probably developed, you know, that would help me express or convey what it is that I am trying to um, say. But, I could use a number of questions. How do I know if I'm being discriminated against in the hiring process? How are the laws ensuring fairness in employment? Do companies actually use affirmative action? Do is EEO implemented by the people who select the potential hires? Does anyone else think that middle management Americans are intimidated by educated and robustly credentialed minorities or even same race peers feigning interview results as not a good match? Do job descriptions and postings actually reflect a logical reception for the pool of talent for a position? Is HR today professional and rational? In areas that have large populations of a certain race, are other races actually interviewed and offered positions and considered for jobs in predominantly variable races? Predominantly populated, well, I don't know what I was trying to say with that, but if I'm a black person and I'm applying for a job in a predominantly Hispanic area, um, am I actually going to get an interview or offered a position, you know, based on what my credentials are? Do Black Americans who have college degrees, certifications, or certificates actually apply to jobs that they're qualified for? I asked this before looking at data and researching my own racist issues with employment and in the workforce, because I expect people to say that they have a job or this isn't um, an experience that they've had, or they don't think that, you know, the hiring process is racist. But, you know, I ask this because I would think that, you know, similar Black people to me, um, in terms of professional or academic achievements, um, I would think that instead of applying to as many jobs as I have, that people like that, they already understand how racist the system is, and they just don't apply. They take the job that they have, making whatever money that they have, and they're not really concerned with optimally, you know, making the amount of money that is reflective of what their worth is. So that's why I asked that question. And that's really important to me because a lot of people, they'll just, you know, ignore it. And they'll say, you know what, I know they're racist, but, you know what, I'm not going to apply. I'm going to keep the job that I have. And even if I'm qualified for this, or even if they're hiring people like me, I'm not going to waste my time being discriminated against. I think, honestly, a lot of Black people who are educated or who do have experience, they're just picking the job that they want to do, or they're trying to just move and work with, you know, Black owned business or Black friendly businesses. And I think that's a form of oppression in and of itself. You know, it's kind of like being passive aggressive about something or just running from your problems to me. Um, but in any case, I think there are stigmas about unemployment in our community. But I just want to know if there are other Blacks with a similar situation to mine who have, or even Blacks who have bachelor's degrees already that are having a hard time landing a job, or they keep getting interviews, but they're not securing the job, or they're not being awarded the position. So without surveying the entire video with questions, um, I'll explain kind of where these questions came from and a bit of my own experience. So for me, I mentioned this briefly. I do have several college level certificates. I have a trade certification, and I'm in college now, still pursuing an undergraduate degree. However, I am a veteran with an honorable discharge, so I do have 4 years of experience in a military occupational field. So I apply for entry level jobs all the time, and I do live in a suburban area. I live, you know, within a metropolitan area, to where I could apply for a large amount of jobs, both corporate and small business and medium sized businesses as well. Um, but, you know, with my experience, I haven't been getting the jobs. I haven't even been landing interviews. I've used staffing agencies and recruiting services, and I have still had no luck. I've applied to maybe over 50 jobs. You know, they are the industry that I want to work in or the occupational fields that I want to work in, but they are not jobs that require bachelor's degrees. Now, even if the jobs do say a bachelor's degree is preferred, I would apply for it if it's something that I have actually done, like warehousing or distribution. So, a lot of those jobs, they are not the jobs that I'm applying for. Many of the jobs are mostly entry level jobs that just require experience, and no degree is recommended, preferred, or required. So I understand, you know, as I'll mention, um, in the future that a lot of these jobs are not, or are, I'm sorry, are very competitive and they have a lot of applicants. Um, but places that I've applied to are like CVS, the local CVS, Brinks, regional country companies in industrial settings for operations type roles, which is what I have a large amount of my background in. Other franchise chains and office and administrative roles. So many of these places I have been to or I actually use sometimes. So I know how they are staffed as a consumer. Um, so I think all the places, of course, should be diverse or reflective of the demographics in your area from entry level to management. You know, a lot of the times I'll go in and I'll see, you know, a lot of the clerks or whatever, a lot of the staff are actually minorities. But when it comes to the managers or the supervisors even, or any of the executives, they are not minorities. So that, you know, is something that's kind of suspicious to me, you know, and I'm wondering how that application process or that hiring process is. But and I know I think that the places should be diverse even still because I know that people in one city will apply to a position in another city. So I think that um, there's not really a big reason to not have diversity. And I'm so sick of seeing jobs that are for only bilingual people. And I'm not trying to call out Hispanics or Mexicans, but you know, if you're in this country, I think the least you could do is speak the language. I understand that we do have a process for getting a green card, getting visas, or whatever it is. But I think, you know, as far as, you know, my concern with what the law is, that there should be some sort of competency as far as the language goes. And I think, you know, when I'm looking for a job, I see a lot of bilingual jobs and I think that it's so condescending. But on any in any case, my thing here is that I believe that they keep trying to tell me that I don't have enough experience. So, or I notice that they ask for experience in the job advertisements or equivalent education. Now, if they're asking for 3 years experience for a job paying about $16 an hour or so, maybe less, maybe more. Um, my question is that what type of inexperienced person with a bachelor's degree is going to accept that type of pay? I mean, are you really trying to say that in order to compete with the people who have 3 years of experience, you know, in order for me, someone who, you know, hasn't had experience working as a store manager or another position that, you know, I've applied to or whatnot, are you telling me that if I had a degree, I need a 4 year degree in which the statistics say that the people who have 4 year degrees, they're making $50,000 a year? You think I'm gonna, in order to compete with people who have 3 years experience, that I need a degree, a 3 year or a 4 year degree for a job that's only $16? That is something that doesn't really make sense to me. Um, so what I'm getting at here is, you know, are the middle management Americans threatened by others' education? Because, first of all, for a lot of the positions, you don't need a degree in order to do them, and in all honesty. And it doesn't really take 3 years of experience to actually do many of the job functions. You know, I don't have a degree yet, but I do have some college courses. Um, and I think I was supposed to actually mention that. Um, but you know, I do have a 3 month certificate in retail management and a business operations certificate that required, you know, 18 credits or 6 courses or whatever, which gave me a foundation in, you know, business functions. So a lot of these, the people who are looking, doing the hiring, not only do they not understand what's actually required to do the job functions, but it's also the people who create the job requisitions or the job advertisements. they're not understanding, what's actually out there or who they're looking for, or who they're excluding. Somebody who could be the perfect candidate for a job, you're excluding them because you're only looking for people with 3 years of experience, and you know, you don't really care whether they have a degree or not. So, I mean, that's one of my little issues with the hiring process. So I know that people work, on jobs 10 plus years, and a lot of people are with the companies they're with. They've been there for their entire careers, and they are very selective with who they are welcoming into their um, organization. And I feel like this is like the first line of defense for discrimination. It's those people who don't have degrees, who have been with the company for maybe 10 years or so, or 6 years, work their way into the position that they're in now. And, honestly, it's not even a lot of jobs out there in the first place. So that's part of the reason why the labor economy is so competitive. But it's also the individual decisions that people make. They're not letting you get the experience, even if you do have some education or if you're pursuing your education. A lot of those people are, seeming to me like they don't want someone who's threatening their job or who makes them feel bad that they actually have worked in every single position from the bottom up, or even in this position or role. I mean, I've worked a lot of different jobs, and I can't necessarily say that I've had one occupational field or one industry that I've worked in. I can't control the jobs that I'm actually getting. So I feel like they're not allowing you to get experience in a bunch of the cases. And when you do get a degree, they're still going to tell you the same thing. They're going to ask you about your work history and if you've ever worked in this industry or in this occupational field, and they're going to question your experience, and they're going to tell you, well, you don't have very much experience, so we went with a guy who has been working here for 3 years. He's been doing this for 3 years, so he's a better fit. So, that goes back to my question about the rationale of what the job advertisements are seeking. This is where the statistics come in, and I want clarity on how the applicants will be screened and how they are selected for a job based on what. I want to have this information. Otherwise, I don't know if someone is trying to make a judgment call on my credentials and experience and then just turn around and hire somebody because they want to work with someone who is not my race. You see, the laws, they aren't really providing a way that, I could know ahead of time that I'm not going to be discriminated against. And the hiring process and the HR, they're not necessarily assessing the candidates on the job. Some of the jobs, they do have assessments, and I've done those assessments. They take maybe 40 minutes, and still, I have called back to some hiring managers who have told me, according to the assessment, you weren't a good match. Now, I have some college education, and I keep referring to this, and I know about professionalism, but those assessments are very tricky. You can never be sure of what your answer is, and I don't think it's right for a company to just go off of an assessment. Oh, I strongly agree, I strongly disagree, or I would help, my teammate, or I would prioritize this or that or the other first. Those assessments, I feel like they are very ineffective. And I feel like there's some sort of an algorithm with people's personalities and their intellect that those assessments actually are based around. Because, I'm a great worker. I know that. I'm professional and I know about prioritizing and I have good management and leadership skills. But I feel like what whatever those little metrics are that the companies are using with the assessments, those little assessments, they're complete hoopla. So, again, I want clarity on who I'm competing against. Um, they always are trying to say that there were other candidates who were a better match. So I'd like to know who I'm competing against, how they're a better match with the company's goals than I am, especially after I send cover letters and especially being a veteran. I wonder if the other candidates are doing these things and why exactly are they getting the jobs over me instead of me? Even companies who claim to be in the business of employing veterans and offering preferences have passed on me. Statistically, it's hard for me to get the picture that I want, you know, due to sample bias and other different sources with the 10 minutes that I actually spent trying to get statistics on who has degrees and, you know, what the workforce numbers are and the occupational fields and things like that. But what I will say is that, there are statistics out there that say that only 68% or 68% of people don't have bachelor's degrees. So that leads me to believing that, you know, people who are in the roles that they're in now, they are people who don't have degrees, people who got jobs based on the experience that they have. And, before I complete my bachelor's degree or really define what my major is, I could do a little bit of research and find out what the in demand jobs are and, pick a career path that would lead to this. But there's always something, when you select something, there's always a way that somebody else can invalidate what it is that you're doing or what it is that you're saying. And I think it's more of a psychological thing with these interviews. And historically, this country has been founded upon racism. So I feel like it's not just the white people; it's Hispanics also. It's a lot of even our peers are not hiring us based on their own personal convictions. They're not picking the candidates who best are qualified for the jobs. And I think a lot of the time with these middle management jobs that they see someone who's pursuing their education or have completed education and they are instantly becoming jealous of them. They don't want to work with them. They don't want them, you know, threatening their position. So, I had a lot of information that I jotted down here, and I wanted to tell a story of, when I went to the EEO about a job that I didn't get. I'll go over it briefly because, someone I asked for feedback of why I didn't get a job or when the applicants were vetted and prioritized, how they were vetted and prioritized, and the response that I got back, it was very negative. They were telling me, "Oh, you're trying to set me up. You're trying to record me, and I don't want to get into this with you." And then they were telling me that they were a part of the team who actually picked the applicants. And I was like, well, was there any consideration of people with education? And he was saying, I don't know. Were there any considerations for veterans? I don't know. So he began to patronize me, and I felt like, it was just unprofessional. Not only that, but he accused me of trying to record him and set him up. So I took this case to the EEOC, and basically they didn't want to file the suit, but they gave me the right to sue. So that means I have to go find my own attorney. But it's these little things that actually add up because it empowers racists to actually continue to deploy covert racism schemes in order to not hire someone. So when I have to go through a whole bunch of red tape and loops and hoops with fire around them, it's eating away at the time that I actually have to file my case. Lawyers will tell you, well, your case, it doesn't really sound like you have anything to sue for because, you know, you have to prove that they discriminated against you based on your race or, blah, 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 blah. But you can never prove that someone's actually racist, especially when they are making a determination. What you could do is you could investigate the pattern of their decision making, and you could do that. But that's the type of stuff that people don't want to do. They don't want to dig through someone's applications and say, this person's black, this person's white, this person's this person's that. Why didn't you choose this person? Why didn't you choose that person? Because they already know that people are racist and that's what they do. And they don't want to, start an argument with them. They don't want to get into it. And I feel like this is a cop out, it's a cowardly way to act. And, I really fault attorneys, I fault people at the EEOC, and I fault, other black people or minorities who aren't standing up for or bringing attention to this, or they're not lobbying for some sort of transparency with the employment process, because there's a lot of jobs that I felt like I didn't get just because I was black. And there's no way to prove that. But what you could do is you could investigate their employment process. There is such thing as affirmative action. And if these companies or these organizations have affirmative action um, implementation, then they need to be following it. Instead of just putting somebody on the phone or not calling someone back or doing all these other things that I get. And I tell you, I follow up with every single job that I apply for, and I send them cover letters. I still don't get the interviews back. And I ask them why a lot of the times, and they just don't return my phone calls or I leave a message. But I do actively, try to find out how I could position myself better from a professional development stance. And, I don't really get very much back. And I feel like racism has a lot to do with it. It is discrimination. So I'm trying to go over my notes here, and I didn't really, I'm looking at the time here, and this is almost 30 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it up. But feel free to leave your experience or any of your perspectives on HR and the employment process and the hiring process. I just think that it's something that people are dropping the ball on, and people are in constant denial that there's such thing as Illuminati, KKK, or white supremacists out there. And this is something that you can't prove by with just legal counsel or legal action. And the people who are supposed to be standing up for justice, they don't even want to, because it just opens up a can of worms, I guess, for them. But it's still a situation that needs to be investigated. It's still something that people need to talk about. So leave your comments and feel free to make your own videos. And I just want to get the ball rolling on some sort of a rhetoric or some sort of a call to action for discrimination in employment. Thanks, guys.